Do you want to understand what it means to forge yourself as a mental monster? We are not talking about physical strength or superficial acts of bravery. We are talking about a level of inner fortitude so relentless that nothing and no one manages to break you. A mind tempered like steel, sharp as a scalpel, capable of seeing what others do not want to accept. That is the essence. Machiavelli, the thinker who most unsettled history, understood this with brutal clarity. The average human being lives, trapped in illusions, sustained by false hopes and emotions that enslave them. They believe that goodness by itself opens doors, that naivety is virtue, that sacrifice will always be rewarded, but reality contradicts them every day. Those who do not see the world as it is end up being devoured by it. The mental monster is not defined by gratuitous cruelty or empty cynicism. It is defined by the lucidity with which they observe life. It is someone who dares to look human nature straight in the face and accept its shadows. Someone who understands that morality is relative, that justice does not always weigh more than convenience, and that loyalty is often a resource that lasts until interest is exhausted. In that terrain, the naive do not survive. Those who think strategically survive. The paradox is that you already know the key from the first seconds. Being a mental monster is possessing an indomitable mind. The real question is how you reach that state. It is not enough to repeat motivational phrases or take refuge in empty optimisms. Fortitude is built with clear pillars, with a mental discipline capable of resisting the pressure of a world that constantly seeks to mold you. To its measure, Machiavelli posed it in The Prince with a rawness that still unsettles those who prefer fairy tales to truth. He said that men forget the death of a father more quickly than the loss of their fortune. And that phrase, as harsh as it is precise, reveals what is essential. The majority does not act from lofty ideals, but from immediate interests. Whoever does not understand this becomes prey. Imagine the world that Machiavelli observed: intrigues, betrayals, kingdoms that crumbled from trusting the wrong word. He advised not to depend on the fidelity of allies or the goodness of enemies, because both are fickle. His lesson remains intact. Real power is not in waiting for others to be just, but in learning to read it without masks. And here arises the first pillar of the mental monster: brutal clarity. Seeing reality without adornments, without illusions, without the veil of self-deception. That is the beginning of all fortitude. Because while others deceive themselves, believing that friendship is eternal, that love conquers all, that at work they are valued for their nobility, the mental monster recognizes what truly occurs. Relationships are sustained by convenience, emotions fluctuate, and in the social arena naivety is paid dearly. Having brutal clarity is tearing off the blindfold, even though it hurts. It is accepting that a person who only brings excuses, no longer adds to your life, that a business that bleeds resources must be closed before it ruins you, that a relationship that shows deep cracks is not healed with blind hope. It is understanding that facts weigh more than desires. This level of lucidity becomes the foundation of all power, because it allows you to decide with precision while others hesitate. A leader who trusts blindly will be betrayed. An entrepreneur who denies the numbers will lose everything. A person who ignores obvious signs will end up destroyed. Brutal clarity protects not because it hardens your heart, but because it prevents your mind from being hijacked by illusions. And the most liberating thing about this first pillar is that by seeing the truth as it is, the possibility of being manipulated disappears. He who lives deceived is always under the control of someone else. He who sees with clarity becomes master of his steps. But accepting reality is only the beginning. What follows is an even greater challenge. It is not enough to see things as they are. You must also learn to govern what happens within you. Here enters the second pillar of the mental monster: strategic emotional control. Emotions are the secret weapon of those who seek to manipulate you. Fear paralyzes. Anger makes you clumsy. Love makes you blind. Guilt keeps you tied. Every poorly managed emotion becomes a shackle. The mental monster knows this, and therefore transforms emotions into tools. He does not deny them, he does not repress them, but neither does he let himself be dragged along. He decides when to Show and when to remain silent, when to let emotion be energy and when to convert it into strategy. How many times did you make a decision in the heat of the moment and then regret it? How many times did you let yourself be guided by anxiety and sign an agreement that did not suit you? How many times did the need for approval lead you to give in too much? Each of those moments are traps, and Machiavelli would have called them fatal errors. The mental monster acts differently. Faced with a provocation, he does not explode. He observes, waits, and responds at the most effective moment. In a negotiation, he does not show anxiety, he transmits calm and obtains advantage. In a personal conflict, he does not beg or break. He knows that showing need is surrendering control. Thus he converts anger into calculated energy, fear into alertness that sharpens perception, sadness into reflection that strengthens, joy into magnetism that persuades. Governing emotions does not mean being cold as a rock, but intelligent as a strategist, because whoever manages to manage their internal states stops being a slave to others. Machiavelli knew it. The prince who shows his vulnerability to his enemies has already lost before fighting. That internal domain is what separates the common from the mental monster. The first lives reacting, the second lives deciding. And that difference is what opens the path to the next pillar. Understanding that it is not enough to control your interior, you must also dominate what the world perceives of you. Mastering your emotions is fundamental, but it is not enough. The mental monster knows that we live in a world where what matters is not always what you are in essence, but what others perceive of you. Here comes into play the third pillar, the art of appearances. Machiavelli was categorical in this regard. Men judge more by what they see than by what they do not see. Few investigate the truth, many settle for the surface. That is why he advised the prince to appear virtuous, just, and compassionate, even when he had to act with harshness. It was not hypocrisy, it was strategy. He understood that perception opens doors that reality by itself would never open. The mental monster applies it to modern life. He understands that most people will not stop to examine his essence. They will only be guided by the impression he projects. And if that is so, why let others control that impression? The key is to decide what to show and what to reserve. Think about it in everyday examples. An entrepreneur who does not yet have all the resources projects security and confidence. That image attracts allies who would otherwise never approach. In a relationship, a person with internal doubts projects firmness in their boundaries. That firmness inspires respect. In social life, someone going through a crisis shows serenity and leadership. That image ensures followers instead of useless compassion. The weak confuse authenticity with emotionally undressing themselves before everyone. They believe that showing every thought and feeling is being honest. The reality is different. That makes them vulnerable. The authenticity of the mental monster lies in the ability to consciously choose which version of himself he wants the world to see. That is the difference between naive exposure and strategic control. Look around you. Political leaders who were not brilliant, but built a solid image that led them to govern nations. Influencers who do not have the best ideas, but project charisma and authority and therefore move millions. Entrepreneurs who were not financial geniuses, but transmitted vision and confidence, and with that raised empires. The secret is not in being perfect, but in appearing convincing. The mental monster understands this as a shield and as a weapon. A shield because it protects his true essence behind the facade he decides to show, and a weapon because he can persuade, influence, and attract others with the image he chooses to project. People think they know him, but in reality they only see what he allows them to see. That is power. However, here arises a warning. If you master your mind, control your emotions, and build a solid appearance but never act, everything becomes smoke. The fourth pillar is what separates the strategist from the dreamer: relentless action. Machiavelli observed it in his time. The rulers who doubted too much ended up losing everything. Those who acted with firmness, even making mistakes, maintained power. In life, indecision is a slow poison that destroys projects, relationships, and dreams. The mental monster does not get trapped in the labyrinth of doubt. He thinks, calculates, plans, and when the moment arrives, he executes without hesitation, without waiting for the perfect moment that never comes, because he knows that the world does not reward the most intelligent or the best, but those who dare to move when others remain paralyzed. Examples abound. Alexander the Great conquered half the world because he acted before his enemies reacted. In the present, entrepreneurs who launch projects with limited resources end up building empires, while thousands keep waiting to have everything under control to start. The same happens on a personal level. He who speaks clearly in time breaks chains, while he who postpones ends up trapped. Relentless action does not mean impulsiveness. It is about acting with precision when you already know what to do, not freezing at the edge of the decision. It is the bridge that transforms strategy into results, vision into reality. The mental monster does not collect ideas. He converts them into facts. And when you unite all these pillars, brutal clarity, strategic emotional control, art of appearances and relentless action, a metamorphosis occurs. Your mind stops being fragile terrain and becomes an impregnable fortress. Your spirit stops depending on external circumstances and sustains itself. Your power stops being borrowed and becomes your own. But the final synthesis is still missing. Because the mental monster is not just a set of techniques, it is an identity, a way of being in the world. And in that conclusion, the true transformation is revealed. A mental monster is not born, it is built. Each pillar we have traversed is not isolated advice, but a piece that fits into a larger system. And the most interesting thing is that by applying these principles, you begin to notice how your environment reacts differently to you. Your clarity unsettles, your control disconcerts, your image intrigues, your action intimidates, and precisely there is the change. You go from being a common person to becoming someone who inspires natural respect. Machiavelli described the prince as a figure capable of imposing himself, not because he was loved or feared gratuitously, but because he projected real strength. History proved him right time and time again. Those who based their power solely on goodness were betrayed. Those who based it only on terror were overthrown. But those who combined vision, strategy, and firmness managed to transcend. The modern mental monster, he does not need a throne or an army. His kingdom is his own life. His strategy is applied in personal relationships, at work, in business, in politics, and even on social media. Whoever masters his mind inevitably ends up influencing his environment. And this is not theory. Just look around. The employee who stops being naive about the politics of his company begins to rise because he understands the internal power games. The person who manages their emotions with intelligence stops being manipulated in toxic relationships and gains autonomy. The entrepreneur who combines vision with relentless action begins to build projects that others only dream of. In all these cases, the difference is the same: mentality. Here we arrive at a central idea. The mental monster does not seek justice, he seeks freedom. He does not wait for the world to be just in order to move. He understands that justice rarely comes on its own. He does not depend on others being noble. He knows that interest is what moves the majority. He does not place his destiny in promises, but in his ability to act with intelligence. Now, this way of seeing life generates discomfort. Many will prefer to call you cold, calculating, or distant, but that is because they do not understand that your true strength is not in denying emotions, but in directing them. It is not in despising morality, but in understanding that morality changes with context. It is not in despising authenticity, but in deciding when to show it and when to keep it. That discomfort is the sign that you are no longer like the others. Being a mental monster means accepting a price, stopping living in the comfortable illusion that sustains the majority. Clarity will isolate you from those who prefer pious lies. Emotional control will differentiate you from those who react to the slightest provocation. Strategic appearance will make you suspicious to those who believe that being yourself is enough. Relentless action will make those who always wait and never dare nervous. And yet, that price is precisely what opens the door to freedom. Machiavelli never wrote for the weak. His words were an uncomfortable mirror for those who sought real power. Today, by applying his vision to our life, we discover that the essence is the same. Stop being slaves to illusions and become architects of our destiny. Having reached this point, the question you must ask yourself is not whether you can be a mental monster, but whether you are willing to carry that transformation, because it is not a title obtained overnight, it is a process. Every time you choose to see reality without filters, you take a step. Every time you control an emotion, instead of letting it control you, you advance. Every time you decide what image to show, instead of exposing yourself without filter, you strengthen yourself. And every time you act with firmness, when others are paralyzed, you consolidate that identity. The mental monster becomes a force difficult to break because its foundations do not depend on external circumstances. Even if he loses, he learns. Even if he is betrayed, he does not sink because he expected it. Even if he faces adversity, he acts with coldness and persists. That resilience is the true measure of his power. In the end, this transformation places you in a unique place, that of someone who does not break when the rest collapses. And that capacity, more than any title, more than any fortune, is what differentiates the weak from the strong, the naive from the strategist, the common from the mental monster. But the story does not end here. It is still necessary to understand how these principles applied continuously completely redefine the way you experience life and the impact you leave on it. That is the last piece of the puzzle, the closing that transforms theory into irreversible identity. From the very beginning, it was clear. Being a mental monster does not mean being cruel or ruthless on a whim. It means being invulnerable in a world that constantly tries to break you. And now you understand it. It is not a simple concept, but a construction that demands 4 solid pillars. Brutal clarity frees you from the illusions that trap the majority. It allows you to see what others do not want to accept, and therefore act from truth and not from deception. He who deceives himself lives in an invisible prison. He who sees with lucidity lives free. Strategic emotional control converts what could be your greatest weakness into your best resource. Fear stops paralyzing you and transforms into alertness. Anger no longer makes you a slave to impulse but calculated fuel. Sadness stops sinking you and becomes introspection. Each emotion stops being a chain and becomes a weapon. The art of appearances protects you from the superficial judgment of the world. You understand that people rarely go deep, that they judge by what they see. You decide then to show what suits you to show and reserve the rest. You protect your essence behind a facade that is not a lie, but strategy. No one has access to your core without you allowing it. Relentless action transforms everything above into reality. Without it, clarity is only observation, control is only theory, and appearance is only theater. With it, everything takes shape. Firm, decisive action without hesitation converts the strategic mind into tangible results. When you integrate these 4 pillars, the metamorphosis occurs. You stop being a piece on the board and become the player. You stop being moved by others and begin to move. Your life stops being at the mercy of illusions, emotions, perceptions, and doubts. Your life comes to be governed by you. This does not mean there will be no obstacles. There will be, and many. It means that when they appear, your mind will not collapse. It means that when someone tries to manipulate you, their strings will not find where to hold. It means that when others are paralyzed, you will advance. That is the true meaning of being a mental monster. Having the capacity to live with eyes open in a world that prefers to sleep. It is carrying the discomfort of truth, with the discipline of mastering oneself, with the intelligence of managing perception, and with the strength to execute without waiting for permission. The price is high, but the reward is higher, because the mental monster becomes someone who does not depend on chance or the promises of others. He builds his path, takes what seems impossible and makes it possible with strategy. He knows that real power is not inherited or asked for. It is conquered with a prepared mind. And here is the final point. The world does not reward the naive, or those who wait, or those who believe that it is enough to be good. The world rewards those who dare to be different, those who forge themselves with mental discipline, those who act where others doubt, those who do not need reality to be just to get ahead. That is your challenge. Stop being one more and dare to be that someone who unsettles, who inspires respect, who remains firm even though everything around wavers. Becoming a mental monster is not for everyone. And precisely because of that, it is worthwhile. Because while the multitude settles for illusions, you choose freedom. The decision is in your hands. You can continue seeing life as they tell it to you, or you can see it as it really is. You can continue reacting to what they do to you, or you can begin to decide strategically. You can continue waiting for the perfect moment, or you can act today. The mental monster is not born from pretty phrases or empty promises. It is born from a mind that dares to think differently, feel differently, and act differently. It is born from someone who understands that power begins in the invisible, in the way you perceive, in the manner you respond, in the firmness with which you decide. In the end, it is not about Machiavelli or history, or even these words. It is about you, about whether you have the courage to cross that line and leave naivety behind, to enter a state where your mind is your fortress. That is the challenge, that is the invitation, that is the transformation.